to be a director, this part's for you, okay? The shot choices are there to communicate to you story. The relationship of the camera to the actor has everything to do with the audience feeling the story. That's when his tears turn into anger, and the anger becomes focus. It becomes a mission. Aloha, young filmmakers and fans of action movies. Welcome to Action Movies Storytelling Through Action. I'm your host, Matthew Salanoa, director of the award-winning 007 I Only Need One, filmmaker of 17 plus years. And this show, I like to talk about my favorite action movies and what makes the action great, and specifically storytelling through action. So my goal for this whole podcast, if you have not been watching, is I just wanted to make a resource for filmmakers to watch a podcast that's really about looking at movies, especially action movies, from a filmmaker's point of view. I do think, there's a lot of great reviewers and great podcasters out there. They're very entertaining, but I think a lot of time the language gets mixed up. They don't really know what goes into making a movie. And this influences Hollywood. There's no doubt Hollywood and every filmmaker looks for the criticisms of their movie. They do want to see the mistakes. They do want to find out exactly what it is that the audience is responding to. And so, it does matter what is said online. But I just wanted to create one place that was a podcast about movies from the filmmaker's point of view. Because I think it's so important that for filmmakers, that if you're getting feedback or if you're looking at a movie and you're looking at storytelling, storytelling is hard enough as it is just to do it. But on top of that, I want you to have a place where you can see with confidence that here's another filmmaker, another storyteller, someone else who's made money and gotten experiences from doing it. That you have hopefully a resource to build your confidence in yourself of, hey, well, this is what this film does. This is what this film does. To look at the movie from the point of view from someone who understands what's going on inside of it and not just judging it as a consumer. Because as a maker, when you know what goes into a thing, you have a completely different point of view on the thing. But at the end of the day, I just want you to be a better storyteller. And I want you to but you can only be a better storyteller by actually knowing what the greats do. And Sam Raimi is one of those greats. Spider-Man 2002 is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I do think in some ways it's superior to Spider-Man 2. But I'm actually going to do a special 4-part series by the time this comes out. Hopefully I'm already working on it. I've shot 3 parts of it. I still need to shoot the last part. I'm planning to make a series called the 4 Stories of Spider-Man. And when I get into that, hopefully you'll appreciate Spider-Man the way I do. So Spider-Man, what is the story of Spider-Man? All right. Bitten by a radioactive spider, uses his powers to become a wrestler and make some money. A robber robs his boss and takes a bunch of money from where he works. He steps aside and lets the robber get away, even though with all of his spider powers, he could have easily stopped the guy. And then that very robber ends up killing his uncle. And after catching the robber and realizing it's the same guy, Spider-Man realizes he can never let a crime go ever again, because he takes responsibility for what happened to his uncle. Now, the beautiful thing about the movie was the only difference between the comic book and the movie for the first half, which tells this whole story beautifully. In the comic, it does take a couple months before that happens. In the movie, as soon as Toby lets the robber go, he goes out, steals Uncle Ben's car, shoots Uncle Ben, and goes driving. Okay, so that's the story, right? And so in addition to that being the story of Spider-Man, that's the nuts and bolts story. That's the thematic story. With great power comes comes great responsibility. Thematically, that's the story. Okay, that's one level. Another level down is this is a coming of age story. Spider Man is a teenager, but the title is Spider Man, not Spider Boy. So he's starting out in high school. We see him bullied. We get his perspective on life that even though he's very smart and he does have a few friends, ultimately society picks on him, doesn't think much of him. He gets beat up on all the time because he's small and no one cares. And on top of everything else, he's deeply insecure and brooding. So he's got baggage. This kid's got baggage. When we get our first action scene in this movie, Peter's been bitten by the spider. We have that wild piece of editing where we're seeing spiders crawl on DNA and stuff like that. And then the next day we're in school. Peter has just saved Mary Jane from slipping and falling in the cafeteria floor. So that's a cool little action moment. And so, wait, whoa. That's a cool little action moment. That's a trailer moment. What is the consequence of this moment? It brings Peter and Mary Jane close for the first time. Up to this point in the movie, we only saw them share a couple glances, right? And what's cool, now I'll get to that. What's cool is that, she does seem to be looking at him from time to time. So it is a mutual connection. But up until this point, they have not actually been physically close to each other. So he rescues her. It's the first rescue. And she's elated. She feels saved, but he's so awkward that the conversation just ends awkwardly, and she goes back to sit with her boyfriend and her friends. But then he sits down, frustrated with himself that he couldn't get a word out when he talked to her, throws his hand down, and somehow a spider web shoots out, latching on to a tray of someone else's lunch who wasn't there for whatever reason, so this gag can happen. And then he just gently yanks on this web that shot out of his hand, and the web snaps back. He Spider-Man dodges the tray of food flying at him, and it hits who? It hits Flash Thompson on the back of the head. Now Flash Thompson, covered in food, angry, chases Tobey Maguire out of the cafeteria. And Toby gets all the way to his locker, not realizing what's behind him, and we get our first little super distinctive action moment, which is his spider sense vision. This is a fantastic invention coming from Sam Raimi, probably inspired by the Matrix time stop sequence. What a wonderful invention, the Matrix bullet time. So we essentially kind of go into bullet time, but it's Spider-Man's spider sense version. So what happens is the camera goes from his eyes, wraps around, we see a fly flying, we see someone shooting, someone with a straw shooting a little spitball at somebody. And so what is the camera work in this bullet time showing us? It's showing us how his spider sense works by literally detecting things that are small and almost imperceptible, as well as threat moments. And it shows that his spider sense detection stretches all the way to almost the other end of the hall. So visually, this little camera action moment, it's the camera doing the action, it's explaining to us how his spider sense works. Okay, this is wonderful. This is what a director is supposed to do. It's not just about watching performances, but especially in an action movie, in a fantasy movie, really utilizing all of your tools to tell the story. So this is how his spider sense works. We don't have another bullet time beyond this until Spider-Man 2. But that's the point of it, is just to explain how his power works. And so we go through all this zooming around, seeing what's going on in the hallway, until finally we come to suddenly this big fist that fills up the whole screen. And we pull back out, and then we see Toby Dodge being punched at by Flash Thompson, who's again, as I remind you, covered in food. And this is technically our first action sequence. So Flash Thompson's throwing punch after punch, and Toby is just dodge, 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 dodge. And then we do go back into the bullet time for just one more second as we see Toby, Spider Man, Peter, as we see him realize, oh, I am like, I'm seeing this happen, but for me it is slow motion. Something is happening with me. This is amazing. And so, but it ends with finally one punch that does get a little too close to Peter's face, but he catches the fist and punches him back, and this punch throws Flash Thompson all the way back across the hallway. So this opening action sequence is as subtle as it gets. You know what I mean? But who could see this and not think, is that guy Spider-Man? Later on. But at the same time, it is also so bizarre and so shocking that if you told someone about it, they wouldn't believe you. And also, nobody even knows his name. So there's a lot of work-ins into the universe as to why, nobody would put together that this Peter Parker kid is Spider-Man. Plus, Spider-Man doesn't exist yet. What does this first action sequence do? How do we get into it? Peter accidentally throws food on Flash Thompson's head. Flash Thompson is Peter's specific bully, who always bullies him in school. And now, emotionally, being angered by this, what appears to be an act from Peter Parker, Flash Thompson wants to reestablish his dominance and show he's not going to take this from this little guy. So that's Flash Thompson's emotional angle for getting into the fight. And Peter, he's just trying to survive, right? But what's the consequence of the fight? The consequence is now Peter realizes he seems to have some kind of super ability, but also he has freaked out some of the people around him. We see that Mary Jane and Harry Osborn, who are really his only friends, they're amazed, but Mary Jane's a little bit shocked and scared. But a lot of people are freaked out, and this makes Peter run away and then just get out of there. So although he's done something amazing, it wasn't really received in a great way. People were freaked out. They didn't really know what to think. Some people were impressed. Some people were freaked out and just didn't want to think about it. But when Peter runs outside, he goes somewhere downtown, out of sight, runs and finds somewhere to hide. Natural spider instinct. And then that's where we get the next action sequence. He stops, he's in an alleyway, out of sight, looking at him like, what is happening to me? And this leads to him seeing a spider up on a web, seeing it crawl, and then he looks at his hands, and again, now Sam Raimi's genius coming back again, where we get the super zoom onto his fingers, and we see the little sticky hair tendrils grow out of his fingertips. And he just gets the instinct to start climbing the wall. And we already had a moment earlier when it's set up in the beginning of the movie that he's trying to get on the bus, and the bus frequently just leaves him behind. Even the bus driver's picking on him. But there was already a moment earlier where he missed the bus. He's running after the bus, and this time there's no Mary Jane to stop the bus for him. So he's tapping on the wall of the bus, and then this paper sign taped to the bus peels off with his hand, and it's his first clue. It's a tiny clue, right? It's the first clue that something's different with him. His hand just stuck to this piece of paper, and he just throws it off. But this is a part of storytelling was is when you have something that's extraordinary, what really good filmmakers do is they give you a subtle taste of it first. You give them a small version of it so that their mind can accept that things are about to change. And then you work the story forward to the point where now you can do bigger and more dramatic things, and the mind can accept that something unusual is happening. Similar approach was made to the filmmaking of RoboCop. When RoboCop is first made in the movie, it was the costume designer's suggestion to Paul Verhoeven, look, the audience is not going to want to accept the look of RoboCop right away. So you're going to have to shoot it in bits and pieces where we don't see all of him. We see maybe his arm, we see his side, we see him from behind. Build up. Take the time to build up to his reveal of how he looks. And Paul Verhoeven took that suggestion and made an excellent sequence where we slowly got to see RoboCop. And it's all a game of perspective, where at first we're seeing RoboCop's point of view, and we just see a monitor that sees RoboCop's vision, and it's through that we get our first glimpse of what RoboCop looks like. And then we cut to the police officers, seeing from behind the police officers, seeing RoboCop behind one of those weird fuzzy glass things, you know. And so this is storytelling. Like it's build up. You're trying to get the audience to a moment. You're building. Everything's building. That's what you're doing. You're building the story. You're building the experience. Okay. So now Peter Parker realizes he can stick to walls, and we just immediately cut to our next action sequence, which is just a simple, fun action sequence. He's running and hopping from rooftop to rooftop. He's having a great time. And because of it's like the least subtle thing, his first experience shooting the web was purely by accident. He doesn't know how it came out of him. So he reaches the end of rooftops on the block that he's hopping on, and then he sees a little crane across the street. He remembers, wait, I can shoot a web, can I? And just the thought is unspoken. We have a little gag where he says different words, and the web won't come out. Finally, he gets it right. It's the hand pose. He gets it right, shoots a web, and he attempts his first web swing. And it goes horribly wrong. And he swings and smacks himself into the side of the wall. All right, and it's a very fun sequence, but it's also just, again, it's a small hint at what he's going to do very soon. You know, the movie is just building, but it's also not wasting time. You know, I didn't want to do it, but I do draw a lot of comparisons to Amazing Spider-Man, which I felt both rushed and took its time with different aspects of Spider-Man's origin. I really felt like Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, did everything completely right. Where, you know, you got to take a big swing, but it's just one swing and it's a total failure. But it lets you know that he's curious, that he's exploring what he can do, and he utterly failed. But at least he knows he can do it. He can shoot a web and he can swing from it. You know, the thought occurred to him. So that's just sort of a seed. But, you know, this sequence it's not an action sequence in terms of fighting. It's more of an adventure sequence. But it's him learning. You know, he's practicing. He's learning what he can do. So it's a fun visual effects sequence that has a live stunt of that web swing, that first web swing. But it's all him learning. So what's the other aspect of this movie? What I should have said it earlier if I didn't say it. Coming of age. So he's a boy becoming a man, and a boy plays and practices and learns and becomes. You know, but it takes playing and practice in order to become. But it also it also requires personal challenges. So when we get our next action sequence, he has well, hey, how do we get to that action sequence? Peter Parker, he gets home late. He was supposed to help out with chores. He missed them. His uncle did all the chores. But he goes outside to take out the trash, and he's hearing Mary Jane's father screaming horrible things at her. And he doesn't feel there's anything he can do. He just walks outside as any normal person would, and kind of just tries to avoid what he's hearing. But then, he hears Mary Jane scream back at the dad, and then she storms outside to her backyard, and we get the sort of signature backyard conversation that, again, bonds them. And it's a moment where she opens up about her life, and he opens up about his life, but also finally speaks to her a little bit toward his feelings and tells her how much he believes in her. And this is hugely important because obviously she does not have a good relationship with her parents, or at the very least her father. And when you see her earlier with Flash Thompson, he's more impressed that he's dating the pretty popular girl than actually interested in her. So when it comes to the whole ordeal of them starting to bond, Flash Thompson shows up and he's got a new car, and she just runs off and becomes, oh my god, I'm so amazed. And it's not spoken, but she's also playing a character. I mean, Mary Jane herself is playing a character. She's playing the girl who's so excited and cares about that. And Toby, because they were having a heart to heart and she just ditched him to go to her boyfriend, and then is so impressed with the car, he has one line, nice car. So motivation. Now he wants a car to impress Mary Jane. He's looking for a car. He finds the cheapest car is like $2,000, $2,500 or something like that, almost $3,000. And then right next to it is an ad for a wrestling match where if you perform well in the wrestling match, you're gonna get $3,000, which is what he needs for the car. So motivation. Okay, so the previous action scenes are him learning his ability, but also seeing people are freaked out by it. So when he learns it privately, because it doesn't seem like he got an exactly great reaction to what was amazing. Harry is the only one who outwardly is stunned by it and likes it. But now we get another signature sequence of Peter Parker designing his spider outfit, which is not the outfit he wears when he goes to the wrestling match. I love what he wears, though. It looks like the Ben Reilly suit, which I love because that to me is a believable Spider-Man suit. I really wish that's what they did with Tom Holland instead of this. I would have been way happier. I did not like the pajama suit. But I gotta say, when we get to the wrestling sequence and Uncle Ben brings him there, right? So again, the building of the story. What exactly is it that gets Uncle Ben killed so much sooner? It's that he's driving Peter unknowingly to the wrestling gig because Peter's keeping it to himself. He just has instinctively decided to keep his transformation and his mission to himself because again, he saw how people reacted to him, right? So it's unspoken, but if you're just visually paying attention as an audience member, he sees the mixed reaction, and that's what makes him freak out and leave everyone behind and learn on his own. And so it can just be implied he doesn't want to freak out his aunt and uncle, who are so much older. He doesn't want to freak them out, so he just keeps it to himself. And then another layer, okay? This goes back to coming of age. This is also, even though this is the superhero genre and he has to do these things to keep his secret identity, human psychology, when you're growing up and you are a kid and a teenager, that's when you start keeping secrets from people. You start experiencing things, mistakes, or even not mistakes, but somehow something happens that you don't like and you're ashamed, or you feel like, wow, this didn't go my way, so now I'm sad and I don't want to share this with anybody. That's where the secrets really begin. And so, really, his transformation into Spider-Man being something that he keeps secret because it's a little gross and sticky on his hand. Hey, Jack Black made this joke in the MTV Movie Awards, okay? If you know, you know. But you know what I mean? The coming of age story, no pun intended, is part of that where we start. This is the age where we start to keep secrets because we're ashamed or because something didn't go our way, and we just don't want to have to tell a story where something didn't go our way because we don't want, disappointment, or we're worried about how people will react. And so that's what Peter's doing. It's just part of the coming of age story where he doesn't quite know what to do. And his uncle is literally in this scene when he drops him off, telling him, "Hey, you can talk to me." And Peter rejects talking to him. He chooses to not do that. But when we get into the wrestling sequence, what happens? Despite his having powers and the spider sense, he is beaten senseless by Bonesaw McGraw. All right, it's a fantastic sequence. Put on the cage, cage. You know what I mean? But what happens in this sequence? He gets beat up. It's his first fight, or technically it's his second fight, but it's his first fight that he has chosen to get into, and he totally gets beat up for the majority of it. And then all of a sudden, he starts relying on the powers that he started to learn earlier, and that's when that's when he survives the fight. And so this is sort of the beginning of the more egotistical Peter Parker. The What we don't know is really his dark side. So when the fight ends and he wins, it's a boost of confidence. He's learned how to practically use his powers. He uses his webs again to yank himself and move himself around. It's only one time, but it's just showing that, hey, he's getting creative with learning his abilities, right? So there's a lot of different things happening in the action sequence. But it's all about him learning. He's learning his abilities. Every single sequence, he's learning his abilities, right? So the story the story is moving forward, but every action sequence, he's basically moving up his skill points. So the first fight, he's learning that he has powers in the first place, and he doesn't know how to control it. The second fight, he starts to develop some self control. Now he's won the fight, and unfortunately, because he beat Bonesaw McGraw, Randy Savage, because he beat him in under 3 minutes, which is what he was supposed to do. He's supposed to make it 3 minutes in the ring, but he beats the guy in two. So under that technicality, the fight promoter decides to only give him $100. And this becomes a layered additional motivation for why Peter lets the robber go. Because again, in movie form, once you kind of put this character in real life and you're watching situations, you just need a little bit more motivation for why he didn't do it. Again, Amazing Spider-Man does it with the clerk, with the corner store clerk, but I think that's such a cheap copy of this, and it's not needed at all. I think his character already has the kind of selfish asshole components that would allow him to let a crime happen. I think it's completely unnecessary. And how Uncle Ben gets there in Amazing Spider-Man doesn't make any sense. But this is all built in, right? So Uncle Ben's the one who dropped Peter off, right? So Uncle Ben was just coming back to pick him up. And that's when, unfortunately, he ran into the robber that Peter let go. So Peter let him go because the fight promoter said, here's $100, that's what you get. Hey, but I need that money. Not my problem. And it becomes Peter's chance to say it back to the guy. Not my problem. But he's proud of it. He's proud of his apathy toward a crime that just occurred. And in the commentary, Sam Raimi's words are, look at the smile on Toby's face. This is going to become a regret that he's going to carry for the rest of his life. That one smile. And literally, Peter gets out of the wrestling ring. He goes to where he's supposed to meet Uncle Ben, and instead finds a crowd and police officers cording off the area. And there's his Uncle Ben on the ground, dying from a gunshot wound to the chest. And fortunately, in the movie version, because in the comic book, he's not there. In the comic book, it happens completely off screen, and, Peter just overhears the cops say that they found the robber and he's somewhere. But in this case, he finds Uncle Ben still alive, which was also the request of Cliff Robertson, rest in peace, who was amazing in 3 Days of the Condor. Cliff Robertson, who was also amazing as Uncle Ben, had requested, "Can I still be alive for this moment?" Because I guess in the script he was already dead, as was in the comic. So this last little moment, because he's alive, gives it a little extra punch when Peter has to watch him die, holding his hand, and he's just, why did this happen? And to the regular audience member, remember I said this: if you want to be a director, this part's for you. Okay, you gave up being a regular audience member the minute you decided to take this podcast and become a filmmaker. Okay, as Gordon says to John Blake in Dark Knight Rises, you're a detective now. You're not allowed to believe in coincidences. Okay, so because Peter watches Uncle Ben die, it hits even harder. And then he overhears the police on the radio saying, we've got him. He's driving down this and this block. Now, Peter's a New Yorker. He knows how to get around. He was going to take the subway, meaning he's been downtown before. All this can be implied that he knows exactly where they're talking about. But this is where storytelling through performance comes into play. You see, I have no respect for movies where you just try to make your actor cry. If you're a director that thinks that just because you made your actor cry on camera, that you've got a dramatic performance, that, I'm sorry, is bullshit. Your actor is there to convey the story with their face. Meaning, this scene begins with a sad Toby, and in a single shot, in a single close-up. I talked about close-ups in the last episode. In a single close-up, which is the meme everyone makes fun of. You're a filmmaker now. You don't care about that meme. In a single close-up, you watch Toby see his uncle die, and it crushes him, and he cries, and it is an ugly cry, and it should be an ugly cry. This is an ugly moment. It's real life, Now, the movie's not real life, but the performance, I think, is great. But when he hears that the gunman is on such and such block, that's when his tears turn into anger, and the anger becomes focus. It becomes a mission, and he lets go of Uncle Ben's hand for the last time in his life, and he steps up and walks away. And the very next moment, now we're getting into our next action sequence, where he's running down the alleyway, and it's our first suit up. So he's pulling off his regular clothes, revealing his Ben Reilly Spider-Man outfit, and what he's already learned, climbing up walls and jumping on rooftops. He gets to a point where he's on a rooftop, and it's too far away to jump to the next rooftop, but he sees the chase happening down the block. So shoots his spider web, and it's a moment of fear. So again, even though it's an action sequence, just like the previous time he shot his first web and he was afraid, right? He hits the fear again. So even though it's an action sequence, it's not afraid to slow down and capture the human moment of change, of revelation, of, oh snap, I'm about to do something that's terrifying to me. And so we get a moment of that fear, and then he just takes the dive because he's emotionally invested. But just because, again, he was sad, he's crying, doesn't mean he's still sad and crying. In this moment, he's scared again. So he takes his first swing. He starts to get panicked, and then shoots another web on another roof, and then takes a second swing. And then we're into the action sequence where he is now in hot pursuit. And you're seeing him do this crazy, wild, awkward dance, which, again, as described in the commentary, Sam wanted this crazy, wild, awkward dance to show how Peter gets into his groove and learns how to shoot webs and swing. So again, this is a master storyteller. Sam Raimi made the Evil Dead trilogy. He's the one who gave us Ash Williams and Hercules and Xena, and the original, the great, the superb. Even though Spider-Man 3 has problems, the superb original Spider-Man trilogy. So this is a master. He is not a novice. He's not new. He's not figuring out how to do things. He's a master storyteller at this point. He'd already made movies for 20 years with no money, and now he's been given the chance to make a big budget Hollywood picture. And every single action sequence up to this point slowly moves the notch of Peter's skills. And now, the way they construct the story, he doesn't wait for months to discover who the robber is. That makes no sense. I mean, you'd have to make an entire movie around that if that's what you were going to do. And again, Amazing Spider-Man fails again. And I'm sorry, because I know those filmmakers are hardworking people and they had a vision, and I hate to shit on them. But you know what? This is why this movie works, because it really picked its battles, it picked its moments, and when we are literally watching Spider-Man learn how to swing, that's also part of the fun, because he's angry and he's motivated, but he's also terrified. And so we get the whole mixed emotion of experience of Peter going through this web swinging for the first time. But on top of that, the way Sam Raimi uses the camera, that the camera, as said in the commentary, that the camera follows him, and that the camera is also getting good at web swinging. So it's shaky, it's awkward with him when he's falling and scared, and as he gets comfortable, the camera also gets comfortable, and the camera does not bottom out or smooth out until he is smoother and better at using his web swinging. So in every single aspect of the storytelling, the story construction, how did we get there? What was our motivation for getting into the scene? Revenge. In every single angle of the story, including how the camera angles are chose, how the camera moves, the lighting. It's not just nighttime, because audience members say this, because it's also partially true. It's not just nighttime because CGI is hidden better. There's a lot of scenes with Spider-Man in broad daylight. Not all of it's perfect CGI, but it's pretty good, right? So the reason it's nighttime is to reflect the darkness and the terror of the sequence, is that it's both a terrifying sequence. Spider-Man is a little bit scary of a character considering he's part spider, but also it's the darkness of this is his time of revenge. This is the dark moment where Peter could go one of two ways. He can be a man of vengeance and darkness, or he can choose the light. And so, when Peter is swinging up and he know the thing that was stolen from Uncle Ben was the car, so he's looking for the car, which is also Sam Raimi's car that's in all of his movies, and it's in The Evil Dead. But again, the story construction is not just for the audience, but for the character. Like, how do we get the character to earn his moments? And how do we get the character to naturally make his achievements that he's supposed to achieve in order to be what we know him to be by the end of the movie? The whole movie, Sam Raimi's goal was to earn the audience cheers. But you don't earn it by making him the hero right off the bat and everyone loves him. You tell the story earnestly in how it was told in the comics, which is he was not popular, he was not smooth, he was actually quite bad at everything, and you watch him go from being bad at all of his powers to being good in this one sequence. But what makes him good at it is his anger and his focus. And so there's motivation going into the scene, and there's a reason he keeps persisting. So despite how terrified he is of what he's doing, he just wants to get the guy who killed Uncle Ben. He wants revenge. And it all ends like in the comic book when he gets to this warehouse or abandoned building, and Spider-Man catches up with him, plays with him a little bit, because he's intending to do something quite terrible. but he's also showing visually that he's learned his powers by now, and he gets to the point of shoving the guy against a wall. But there turns out they're at a port. It's an abandoned port for boats and stuff. So there's a boat outside with a spotlight, and it comes up, and the light reveals that the man who killed his uncle is the same robber that he let run out of the building. And so this is a beautiful piece of story construction because it builds, and the release is knowledge. It's like, oh no, the guy that I let go because I didn't care, and not only did I not care, I was just mad at the other guy for not giving me an extra buck, even though that's what was promised. But the guy that I let go, who I could have stopped easily with no problem, he killed my uncle. My uncle's death is my fault. What are the consequences of the action sequence? He's learned his powers, but he's also learned the terrible truth that he is directly responsible for his uncle's death. Granted, this man pulled the trigger, but he would never have been in the position to do that if Peter had just done the right thing at that moment, which is the lesson of the comic book, but also emotionally for the story. Look, if we had stayed completely true to the comic and it took months before he found out, in terms of movie time, story time, the audience would totally feel like the anticipation and the threat of the need for revenge would be a bit lost. It'd be a little bit awkward, like, wow, it took months, okay. But by condensing it into one night with that fresh rage, it actually strengthens the power of that reveal that, oh God, the responsibility, it really hits home. But every part of the action gets us to this point. You know, at first he's being bullied, then he's being beat up by a wrestler, and now he becomes the bully. He becomes the vengeful, angry bully to this guy who he's only responsible for killing Uncle Ben so much as Peter allowed him to escape to do it. And so the consequences of the action are revelation. So, even though it was wonderful that he learned his powers, now all of it just made him realize, God, what have I done? And so, although it's never stated verbally, and I think one thing that's really beautiful is watching Peter come home afterward, and it's just this wide shot where we see Aunt May step up to him, and she's already gotten the news, and she just cries into his arms. But we've gone now from up close to Peter, sitting on the Griffin up on what is the Empire State Building. We got his close up of just, oh God, this, because that's a beautiful Spider-Man moment. He catches the guy, realizes who it is, and then movie stuff. The guy does try to get him with a gun. Peter breaks his hand, and then the guy trips and falls. But again, you're kind of responsible for that death as well. But that's a movie. In the comic, he just delivers him to the cops. But the very next scene is a very Spider-Man moment where Spider-Man's all the way up on the Griffin, and you see the close-up of his face of just the awe of his level of responsibility for what's happened tonight. And then the camera backs away, and the distance tells you how empty he feels. Even though it's a beautiful shot, it's a beautiful shot of a lonely man stuck in his thoughts with absolute darkness around him. Again, darkness comes up, not just for the Thunderbolts. And so when he shows up at home and he's the furthest person away from camera, and Aunt May comes and cries into his arms, this is also the visual storytelling that he is further away. He is now having this experience of this hollow emptiness and the responsibility for it. There's a reason the camera is the way it is. Now, they may have shot close ups of the sequence, they may have shot different angles, but the fact that the editor left it there, and it may have just been shot that way. A lot of directors will shoot that way, knowing that that's what the image means. But that's why I've wanted to discuss this movie in this way with you, because I wanted to explain to you what Sam Raimi's doing with the camera, what he's doing with the story construction. Granted, yes, there are screenwriters. David Koepp wrote Jurassic Park. I'm slipping on the other writer's name, but he wrote the second movie as well. Yes, there are screenwriters, and they are owed their due for how the movie came about. But what did I talk about with the Blade episodes? The director's job is to also look at the script and make sure that the story direction is going the right way. And even if he's happy with the script, it's so much more important that the way he shoots it communicates what the script can't communicate. The where the camera is has everything to do with communicating the character's emotion. And so the fact that the last close-up we get is Toby just feeling crushed and terrible for what he's done, and then we get a wide shot. It's a beautiful wide shot, a wonderful Hollywood wide shot, with that distance from him looking at the darkness. It's symbolic of how he feels hollow, how he now feels so small. Now he's smaller than he ever was. When the movie starts off, our introduction to him is this tiny silhouette of a person running behind a bus, because we're just seeing him in the side view mirror of the school bus. And that's just how people are treating him. That's other people's perspective of him. But now that he's responsible for Uncle Ben's death, when we punch out and now he's just a silhouette against the darkness, now he's less than the silhouette in the light. Now he's responsible for feeling like small, like he's nothing. And so the shot choices are there to communicate to you story. There's this picture right here. This is from one of my first classes at Academy of Art University, where I was fortunate enough to get a presidential scholarship. Thank you. This is from Sketching for Communication. It was a great class. It's a really great class for coming up with visuals to tell stories visually. Now, if you're a storyboard artist, you got to take this class. But if you're a director, the director takes all the fundamental classes for all of the varying crew member jobs. Why? Because he must know what all of their jobs are. A captain cannot run a ship without knowing every part of the ship and what everyone's job is and how they operate. A captain who does not know how to run a ship will run the ship to the ground. So, this here was my first attempt, and you can see the first two shots aren't great. You can't really tell what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. I basically have a guy trying to break into a car, and then the car door swings open, knocking him 20 feet back, and the car transforms. It turns out the car is Bumblebee, and he's feeling violated, so he stomps on the guy. And because I want to make Spider-Man and I want to make Transformers movies, I want to make superhero movies, I chose to make the thief wear a Spider-Man mask. Also because I was not confident in my face drawing skills. But if you look at that, you see, again, the first two shots, terribly unclear what's going on. But everything else, you can tell what's going on. And what I talk about in previous videos, just being able to communicate visually what's going on is half of getting the audience to be on your side and to understand the story. If the audience can understand the story, they can go along with it. Now, some movies are art house and they don't like to be so blatant, and that's totally fine. There's room for that. The visual medium is for all artists, no matter what they're interested in. But when it comes to big cinema, blockbuster filmmaking, it's so important to really nail this down. You know, you have to make sure your visuals are communicating something. Again, even if it's just subconscious. Like subconsciously, I know the audience, because I felt it, When you see the close up of Peter Parker and he's on the Griffin and he just, oh my God, I'm responsible. He's not saying the words, but it's in his performance because we know it just happened. And then when it cuts back and see the wide shot, even though it's a beautiful shot, you know it's a shot of him being trapped in his loneliness, trapped in his guilt. And so when we get the wide shot of him coming home and we're just staying in the wide shot and he's the furthest thing away again. Him being the furthest thing away as established from the first shot of him in the movie, just the silhouette of a goofy high school kid trying to catch a bus. That image of him being small is indicative of how he feels about himself. In the beginning, it's how society treats him and thus how he feels about himself. But now, this is a coming of age story. Now he has made a choice. Now he has made a mistake he can never undo. And now this is how he feels about himself because of what he has chosen to do. Okay? So when a director picks these visual moments, when the director picks the camera to be close or to be far, the relationship of the camera to the actor has everything to do with the audience feeling the story. Spider-Man 1 was a hit. It technically made the most money out of all three movies. Even though the second movie, it made the second most, but it was critically far more well received. But I do firmly believe that people give this movie a bad rap because Green Goblin did look a little goofy, and I'll get into this when I make my 4 stories of Spider-Man podcast, because it's just a 4-parter. It's just for talking about this movie. But I think Green Goblin was a little goofy. It was a lot for people to take in. He did not get the smoothest introduction. But in the case of the story, I think also people were very much let down by Peter not getting together with MJ at the end of the movie. But everything leading up to this moment, which is everything I wanted to talk about, this is why he made that choice. Because he still is filled with his guilt, a guilt that's not resolved, even though Green Goblin gets killed at the end of the movie. So, and then the very fact that the rest of the movie is the Green Goblin showing up, and Green Goblin finds out who he is and immediately kidnaps Mary Jane. This is why Spider-Man decides, well, if I'm living in this world where the bad guys can figure out who I am and target my friends and family, then the only option for me is to distance myself from my friends and family, which is the unspoken story of what's going on with him in Spider-Man 2. I mean, you get it when you're watching Spider-Man 2, but I think still people are so furious about the ending of Spider-Man 1 that they don't give it that break. But to me, Spider-Man 1 is an almost perfect movie. To me, the only flaw with the movie is just the Green Goblin stuff. It could have been a little bit better done, both the writing and the directing. Not Sam Raimi is a bad director, just you see his choices with Doc Ock. He figured out how to just get the audience visually there and emotionally there, but also he took a different route where Doc Ock becomes a more direct friend to Peter, as opposed to in this movie it's Norman Osborn sort of doting on Peter because he realizes Peter's a like spirit. But I get into more of that in the upcoming podcast, which is hopefully I'm working on that by the time this comes out. At least working on it. We'll see. But yeah, so that's what I really want to get into for Spider-Man, is that it's coming of age. And now I'm just going to talk briefly about The Matrix. So if you love the first Matrix, hey, stick in there. I'm going to make this as short as I can. Really, this podcast does help if you've seen all these movies. So I'm sorry if you haven't. I'm just going to try to blow through this one. What's the first action scene of The Matrix? Trinity, she's on a computer. The police have found her. This is our first bullet time. She beats up the police. It turns out there's a whole bunch of police outside, and there's 3 agents that are there. And one of them chases her on the rooftops with the police. And we get our first amazing shot where Trinity leaps from one rooftop to the other. And this is the beginning of fantastic shot choices, cinematography from the Wachowskis. Then at the time, there were the Wachowski brothers. Now they're just the Wachowskis. It's fantastic shooting style. And the cinematographer for The Matrix, I can tell you off the top of my head, is Bill Pope. He's responsible for a lot of Hollywood movies, but especially most known for the Matrix movies. But he is also the cinematographer for Spider Man 2 and 3. Bill Pope worked on Sam Raimi on some of his earlier works and thus was the intended cinematographer for Spider Man 1, but he was making The Matrix, so he couldn't do it. But Don Burgess, who did, I think, the Garfield movie with Bill Murray, he was the cinematographer for the first movie. But I think he overall does a good job, but I don't like how they shoot the actors' heads. I think all of their close-ups are terrible. But I don't really know who to blame there. That's really up to the filmmakers and what they did. Because you look at the screen tests, and they're fantastic. So I don't know what's up with that. But yeah, so the look and style of The Matrix is so good. The first opening action sequence is really a world builder. It lets us know where we are in the world, and it establishes the location that we're going to come back to by the end of the movie. But when we get to Keanu Reeves' story, our first action sequence is him also running from the agents, but he's just hiding behind cubicles, which is kind of, it's more adorable than anything else. But then we get to, he meets Morpheus and he wakes up. He wakes up in the real world for the first time. And then when he's reintroduced to the computer world, it's inside the construct where the rebels who live in the real world, flying around these hover ships, who hack into the Matrix to try and set people free. These rebels are, they create this construct so that they can safely practice the abilities that they're capable of in the Matrix, and so that when they go to the Matrix, they already know how to do whatever it is they need to do and can accomplish it quickly. Because when you're a rebel, it's smash and grab and run. But in this case, so Neo's first fight in the Matrix is with Morpheus. It's a sparring session. They're fighting each other, but it's not to hurt one another. And in the opening scene, we realize the agents are the villains and they're there to kill. You know, the Trinity's fight scene ends with her getting to a phone, and the agent Smith has decided to drive a truck into that phone booth back when phone booths were a thing. So they're there to kill. That just sets up our villain and sets up our universe. And we set the way they fight, right, tells you who they are. One guy is trying to kill the girl, so they're the bad guys, at least as the story reveals. But when it comes to Neo's first fight, it's a training session. He's learning how to fight with Morpheus, and so they're not trying to kill each other. But what's the consequence? What's the purpose of this fight scene? Morpheus is trying to teach him how the Matrix works. And the most important line in the whole fight scene, they spar once, and Neo is knocked to the ground and out of breath, and he's breathing hard. And Morpheus says to him, "Do you think that's air that you're breathing right now?" And that's when Neo realizes, that's right. I'm not breathing air. There's no air. This is in my mind. And that's when, for the second sparring session, Neo starts to unlock his power, and he can punch faster than anyone has ever punched before. And people are starting to see, oh, maybe he's the one. The reason they tried to free Neo is because he is supposed to be the one who will change the Matrix and save humanity from the dominion of the machines that have placed humanity in this AI-generated Matrix world, and to enslave them and use their bodies for power. But unfortunately, when we get to the next training sequence, which is jumping from rooftop to rooftop, as Trinity already did, Neo panics and he can't do it. He still thinks he's in the real world somehow, and he falls straight to the ground, and then Looney Tunes bounces off the ground. So it's something to say that, you know, the computer world it's not real, but at least in the construct, the ground doesn't have to be the ground. It can just be sort of a trampoline ground that you can bounce off of and safely land without hurting yourself. So again, it's more world building, but it's also it's a coming of age. So Neo is learning how to defend himself. In the next action sequence, Morpheus takes Neo to meet the Oracle, who's supposed to help him find his destiny and realize who he is. And then when they go back to their hideout to come back to the real world, they have been there's been some subterfuge. There's a traitor amongst them. They don't know that there's a traitor yet, but the agents have found them, locked off the building. They can't escape, and they're trying to sneak through the walls. They're hiding in the walls, trying to crawl down with the plumbing, and that's an amazing, harrowing sequence. But then our traitor sneezes, exposing them that they're in the wall, and the police start shooting, and an agent appears, and it's clear that they're about to get Neo. And so Morpheus sacrifices himself, throws himself down, and fights with Agent Smith in order to give them time to run away. So here is our next fight scene, and again, the agent fights to kill. Morpheus fights to give them time. He's just fighting as best he can. He'll kill him if he can, but he's really just fighting so that they can run. So everyone has a different motivation going on here. But also, Neo's words of advice from the Oracle were that Morpheus is the important person here. He's the one that's needed to save humanity, and the truth is, you're not the one. But if Morpheus dies, humanity is for certainly lost. So Neo doesn't want Morpheus to sacrifice himself, and the consequence of the action scene is that Morpheus gets taken alive because actually he's the one the agents want. They want his knowledge so that they can. Morpheus is also the captain of these rebels, the captain of the ship. They want his knowledge. His knowledge will allow them to break into Zion, where the last of humanity that's free is living, and kill them all off. So Neo doesn't want to be saved in this moment, but because he is saved, it motivates him to then go back into the Matrix to rescue Morpheus, using what he knows. The rest of the movie doesn't happen without this sacrificial moment. It's the moment that motivates. It's the moment that motivates Neo to take action, use what he's learned from the sparring session and from all the training that he has, and now he's going to go rescue his mentor. So this movie's a bit more fundamental, but we have coming of age. We have the deeper concepts of what is reality being played out in all of these scenes. So a lot of different things are hitting you over the course of the movie. Literally the question of, are you sure that's air you're breathing right now? Things like that are being used to get your mind to acclimate to this other concept. And I've already talked about the Matrix in the last video, where it's ultimately the theme is conformity versus individual conviction. So obviously that's there, but I talk about that in the other video. But when Neo rescues Morpheus, that's when he has the revelation that he is the one. That in fact, not that I do believe the Oracle was correct that they need Morpheus to survive, but without the threat of Morpheus's doom, Neo would not be motivated to rescue him and then therefore discover that he is capable of so much more than he ever thought. So in essence, the next great line of this movie after rescuing Morpheus is Morpheus says to Neo, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Meaning that you may know that it's your destiny to be someone who's the next great screenwriter or the next, or a school teacher. But the path to getting there is not going to be so direct. Knowledge is direct. Belief is direct. But the experience of achieving whatever it is that you believe you should be doing, it's not going to be that easy. And it's going to take doubt, and it's going to take people telling you that you can't do it. but then you're just going to have to get up and do it if that's what you're supposed to do. So there's an element that choice is integral to destiny. That fate plays an equal role to choice is kind of the suggestion here. But also that even destiny requires journey. It requires you have to go through all the processes that we human beings go through. The coming of age, right? Learning how to do something, failing at it, doing it wrong, rejecting a notion, and then finally being pushed exactly into the area where you at first thought you doubted if you should go there, and now you're there and you realize, oh, I was meant to be here. I can do this. So the Matrix is just as much a coming of age story as it is a representation of a person becoming their true selves and defeating the conformity that society puts on us. So, and then even our next action scene when Neo fights Agent Smith, that's him beginning to believe he is the one and that he can actually defeat Agent Smith. And although he does defeat Agent Smith in the battle, Agent Smith is still a simple program, so he just reloads himself, he respawns, and although he was hit by a train, gets off the train and he's ready to fight again. And so Neo just has to run. So every lesson Neo is taught comes into play in the movie. And when we finally reach the final action scene, spoilers if you haven't watched this movie yet, when we reach the final action sequence where Neo has gone back to the room from the beginning of the movie where Trinity started, and the phone is ringing for him to escape out of the Matrix. He finds Agent Smith there. He gets shot in the chest, but it is in the real world where Trinity whispers to him, "The Oracle told me something," and she was trying to tell him multiple times but couldn't bring herself to do it. She told her that she would fall in love with the one, and that the one would be a dead man. And she tells him, now it came true, but you're not dead, so get back up. And it's kind of the reverse Sleeping Beauty going on here, the female waking up the prince. And this fight scene now, Jesus resurrected, or really true self unleashed. Now when Neo wakes up, he's completely enlightened to being the one. He completely understands what he is to some degree. And when Agent Smith comes at him, Agent Smith is moving as fast as an agent can move, and Neo is still moving in slow motion, defeating every single thing that Agent Smith can do. And even then, Neo jumps into him, blows him up, and when Neo takes a breath, the entire hallway breathes with him, meaning that his powers have come to fruition. But this is multiple things. He's come of age, he's become, but also symbolically, if we know that the theme of these movies is individual conviction, or who you truly are versus what society tells you to be, then the truth of the metaphor here is that once you've realized who you actually are, the tools of conformity can't work on you anymore. And the tools of conformity are oppression, they're violence, or it's just very strong suggestion. But essentially, being the one, in this case, it's just a metaphor for being yourself. Once you're your true self and you've activated that genuine part of who you are, conformity cannot stop you. You just be you. But getting the rest of society to break out of that is the challenge of the sequels. So this is what I had wanted to get into about how action, it's literally it's storytelling. Action is storytelling. It's just, this is the genre. You've picked the action genre. So although we're in an action sequence, which when you were a regular audience member, you're supposed to think, cool, I am being wowed. Popcorn. Wow, 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 amazing. Even though that's what you think is happening, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a storyteller, look at what I talked about Spider-Man. All of that's from the commentary. You can go watch that yourself and see that I'm not lying to you. There will be none of that here on this podcast. I came here to help you be a better storyteller. But the only way you're going to be a better storyteller, you can't listen to podcasts, you can't listen to movie reviews where they've never made a movie before. You've got to listen to other filmmakers, and especially if your dream is to work in Hollywood, if your dream is to work with the best of the best of the best, then you better be ready to have a conversation with these people, because all of them, all of the top performers are going to have some kind of knowledge or life experience that they feel passionately about that got them there. Because this is a movie about making dreams, but dreams are made out of so much more than simple spectacle. The spectacle itself may mean something very powerful that's unstated, but it's absolutely what the movie is about. And that's what I've come here to teach you. So if you keep watching action movies, storytelling through action, this should be the end of my orientation where I just trying to break you into how I look at movies. From this point on, many of the things that I've said may not be stated. I may not say it this exact way, but when I'm talking about movies and action movies, this is the way that I'm looking at the movie. So, and this will be a limited series. So, action movies, storytelling through action. It's a limited series. I don't know exactly how many parts it's going to be, but I'll be talking about my favorite action movies and what you can learn from them. Some movies I'll be going into full talk about that I've only talked for sections about so far. But this is going to be a limited series, and then after I'm done here, I'll be talking about some of my favorite comedies, because comedy is just drama in disguise. So if you enjoy this, if you want to be a filmmaker and you like where I'm going, please keep watching, and because there's going to be a lot more. But it's limited, and I'll be talking about comedies in the future. So I want you to be aware that what I'm saying about action movies, it applies everywhere. And again, you don't need to watch this. If you want to be a filmmaker, I just urge you to go watch commentaries from the real directors. That was my original podcast, was commentaries from directors. They're not all fun and funny. Some of them are very boring. But if you can just stifle the need to not be bored, you might actually learn something that's very valuable to telling stories and making good movies. So I think I've generally covered what a director is supposed to do across these episodes. So, my homework for you today, I want you to think about the directing concepts. I want you to think about the directing concepts I presented in this episode. When I talked about the close-up and what it means, and Peter Parker's distance to camera and what that means, I want you to think about that, and I want you to let's make another short film today, okay? I want either 1 minute to 5 minutes, 5 minutes max. Please let it just be on YouTube. I don't want Vimeo links. I don't want strange internet links to weird websites where you're going to try and hack me or give me something. Just give me a simple YouTube link, or preferably that I should just be able to click on your profile and it should be on your YouTube page. That's where I want to see it. I don't, just leave in the comment, hey, click on my profile, just say the name of it, and then I'll go to your YouTube page and I'll watch your short, and I'll leave a comment when I've watched it. It might take me a while to get to it, but if you do the homework, just leave a comment that you did it, and make sure that that's also the title. Whatever it is the homework is, make sure that's the title, because I've had 3 homework assignments so far, and this is the second video one. So make sure in your title it's homework 2, action movies, camera relationships, or something like that. Or at least in the description say that this was what the homework was. I'm very excited to see what you got. It may take me a while to get back to you. And you can also let me know, do you want criticism? If you don't want criticism, that's fine. But if you just want me to let you know I watched it, it might take me a while, because I also have friends who make stuff, and so I need to get to their stuff and watch and read their scripts and things like that. But I totally want to see what you come up with and what matters to you. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time. Until then, enjoy your action movies, and mahalo and aloha.